Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Daily Booster for Biology. This is number 15 in our series. Do note that this is one of the advanced information listed topics. It is listed for the foundation tier biology this time, not explicitly for the higher tier, but remember that doesn't mean there won't be questions on it. What we're going to be doing today then is we're going to be having a look at the brain. So the regions of the brain, what they do, and also how we investigate the brain and the problems with that. So as far as you're concerned, there are 5 key regions of the brain that you need to remember. The cerebrum, the cerebellum, the medulla, hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. They can give you a question where they give you an outline of the skull, like the picture on the left, and there is a little line pointing to part X, and you need to name it. So obviously on the left there we can see we've got a load of other things that are not going to be asked. So realistically we need to know where the medulla is, and you can see it's this bit that kind of sticks around about level with your nose. So from the nose, if you move across and there's a bit with X, that's the medulla. The cerebellum is the leaf-shaped bit at the back there. Your hypothalamus, this is the little region, kind of dead center, if you like, in the diagram of the head. You then have the cerebrum, which is the big grey bit across the top in this diagram. And finally, your pituitary gland, which is the little bit sticking down that faces kind of diagonally down towards your chin in most diagrams. So probably the easier ones to remember: the cerebrum, the top bit, the cerebellum, looks like a leaf, and the medulla level with the nose. The two you're most likely to mix up are going to be the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is in front of the hypothalamus, okay? You just need to learn it. So print out the diagram, just test yourself over and over again to make sure you know which one each of those 5 bits actually are. We then need to know what they do. So the cerebrum is all about complex behaviour. So learning, memory, conscious thought, personality, all of that comes under your cerebrum. The cerebellum is all about posture and balance and some of these involuntary movements that we have. The medulla is your automatic actions, heart rate, breathing rate. Hypothalamus is the regulation zone for our temperature and our water balance. And the pituitary gland, that's a store of our hormones, and it will release them as and when they're needed. Obviously, for those of you doing higher tier, then this isn't explicitly listed as a topic, but there is a chance it can come up. So this is just for higher tier folks. Those of you doing foundation, you won't be asked about this. And this is looking to see how we actually investigate brain function. So how is it that we know those different regions do those key things? Well, we can go back and start off with just using stroke patients. And people who've had a stroke, that's where the blood supply to the brain has been interrupted. Now, as a result of that, there's been damage to certain regions of the brain. If we then have a look to see what the impact on the stroke patient is, we can then see which regions lead to what effects. Second option, we can use some electrodes inside animal and human brains. It's about as delightful as it sounds. And we pass these small electrical impulses into regions of the brain, stimulate them, and we will then see what happens at that point. Option number 3 is our computed tomography or CT scans, and these use X-rays. Now, they're great because they produce these 3D images of inside the body without having to open it up in any way. The downside, they are X-rays, so that means there is an increased risk of cancer. Next option is the MRI or magnetic resonance imaging scans. These use very powerful magnets in order to identify anomalies in the brain. So these are the ones that you don't want to be wearing metal items into the scanner, otherwise you won't be wearing the metal items after. fMRI, the functional MRI scans, these produce real-time images where you can literally get patients to do something, play a guitar or what have you, and then what they're going to be able to do is observe which bits of the brain have increased blood flow, i.e. which bits of the brain are involved in that particular thing. Now, we do have difficulties with investigating the brain. First of all, we need consent from the patients in order to be able to share that information, and not everyone is going to be happy with that. The reason for that is that depending on what the injuries are, then some people may not want their information shared because it's almost like becoming that sideshow curiosity. So privacy can be an issue there. Secondly, to get reliable conclusions, we need to study a large number of different cases, all involving the same thing. Now, the trouble here is that each study is individual, because every individual accident, injury, what have you, is going to potentially impact on different regions of the brain. So it's not going to be a case of you can recreate it time and time again to get this really large bank of case studies. So that makes it hard to draw reliable conclusions. We may also find that the specific functions we're looking at are not controlled by just a single region of the brain, but by several. And if we go down the route of, well, we can just test on animals, then again we come to the ethics, because many people believe animal testing is unethical. So why do we really care? Well, if there's damage to different parts of our nervous system, we have some quite significant effects. Now, nervous system damage is just any damage to either the central nervous system, CNS, made of the brain and spinal cord, or the peripheral nervous system, all of the other neurons running through the body. Now, we've got basically 4 key causes of this damage to our nervous system. First, injury. Second, could be a genetic condition. Third is a disease. Or finally, consuming something that is toxic. So when we're looking at what causes nervous system damage, it usually falls into one of those 4 categories there. If we start off by considering the peripheral nervous system and the damage to the PNS, then what we're looking at here is damage to your sensory or your motor neurons. Now, one of the key things that you're going to see as a result of that damage is an inability to detect pain, or regions of numbness. By that we mean that there's going to be parts of your body that even if you push on it, if you stick something in your hand, you may not feel it. We can also see a loss of coordination if we're talking about those motor neurons that normally obviously send the electrical impulses to muscles to move them. If there's damage to that, we're not going to be able to do this. And that means we've got a range of effects that we could see depending on which region of the body is affected. Now, we do have a limited ability of regeneration ability in our peripheral nervous system, so minor nerve damage can self-heal. If it's more significant, however, then you can see bigger problems, because we can't just self-generate a solution to this. We may be able to treat that through surgery, so that's basically where we're going to graft nervous tissue over the damaged sections. It might be that we just can't do anything, and therefore you've got loss of control of certain body systems. You might have some level of paralysis, either partial or complete, depending on where the damage has happened. You could suffer with memory loss or processing difficulties if we're talking about regions going to the brain, for example. Now, the key problem that we find is our central nervous system cannot regenerate. So any damage to our central nervous system is going to be permanent unless there is a surgical option to correct it. So, when it comes down to our spinal cord and why surgery isn't always an option for spinal injuries, so this is look at our central nervous system, then we've got these 31 pairs of nerves. Now, each of those pairs of nerves contains many individual nerve fibres, but the whole thing comes to a diameter of just 1.5 centimetres. Now, all of those nerves that are communicating throughout your body are going to pass through that spinal cord of just 1.5 centimetres. So, first of all, we have the problem of how to identify the damaged nerve fibre, and secondly, how to actually repair it without causing damage to the others. Because this is so tricky, what we normally find is that spinal injuries are irreversible. So if you do something that causes severe enough damage to your spine that you've then lost function of arms, legs, whatever it may be, normally that is going to be lifelong. There's nothing we can really do about that. In terms of the brain then, so the second region of our central nervous system, firstly, it's quite difficult to diagnose because we still are working out all the different bits of the brain and how they interact with each other. And the treatments are not always straightforward either, because depending on where the issue is, again, it might cause damage to healthy brain tissue to try to get to the injury. The options we've got available for us, first of all, we've got the different types of tumours. So if you have brain cancers, then we can use radiotherapy or chemotherapy to treat those tumours in many cases. Option 2 is surgery, so we can remove damaged tissue, but as we've already said, can be hard to access. Option 3 is this idea of deep brain stimulation. So by that we mean we're going to use electrodes to stimulate brain function in certain areas if it's not working as expected. So final thing to do today then is head on over and have a go at the quiz for the day. And don't forget to join us again tomorrow for our next Biology Daily Booster.